afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Amy Senator. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber. Thank you all for being here and for stretching out. It's been a long day, but it's been a fantastic day, and I couldn't be more thrilled about the participation. I want to take a moment just to thank some key people. First and foremost, I want to thank our sponsors, our Platinum Partner sponsor, Hancock Lumber. I want to, please. I want to thank our gold sponsors, Gorham Savings Bank, the Home Depot, the Wyndham Eagle. I want to thank our business reception sponsor, which follows this immediately afterwards, Spring Meadows Golf Club and Spring Meadows Estates. Our media sponsor, Current Publishing. Our directional signage sponsors, Cross Insurance and Sebago Trails and Paddling Company. Our venue sponsor, obviously, St. Joseph's College. Our lanyard sponsor, Edward Jones Investments. And by far, and she's not in the room because she's over in the gym helping all of the vendors get packed up, I'm sure. But I really want to thank the committee members who helped me and the Chamber make this event possible. Julie Arsenault, who is the chair of the planning committee that put this event together, spent tireless hours along with me and a bunch of other volunteers who you've seen throughout the day. So there really is a strong sense of commitment within our Chamber and our board of directors, and I really want to publicly applaud everybody for their participation. So thank you. I'd like to introduce our honored moderator today. Her name is Diane Dunton. She is president of Potential Release Consulting Services. She has over 25 years of business and human resource experience. She assists organizations in creating compelling strategies to meet complex and challenging business demands and the needs of individual professionals. She holds a master's degree in counseling and has extensive experience in organizational development. Ms. Dunton has received specialized training with the National Training Labs, the Gestalt Institute, the Center for Creative Leadership, the University of Michigan's Organizational Career Development, and the Center for Re-Engineering Leadership Programs. Prior to starting Potential Release Consulting Services in 1996, she spent most of her career with a Fortune 500 company. I do want to say that Diane has also been a very long-term member of our Chamber, and I'm so excited to have her here today to lead this exciting conversation, and I look forward to everything that she can bring to the Chamber in the months ahead. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Amy. Should be on. Yes? Got it. So this has been an awesome first, an absolutely awesome first. And for all of you that committed to being here today, I want to give you and us a round of applause. We are lucky enough to have 4 panelists, and I'm going to get to them in a minute. But first of all, I want to just say that today has been a new beginning. As I spent the day walking around, and I had different outfit because I kind of went incognito, and I was kind of wanting to know, what is the feel? We had such an awesome opening with Bill Diamond sharing his thoughts and his business model and his perspective. And then throughout the morning, I went around and I was able to talk to many of you and ask a couple questions. And the questions that I asked were, what is on your minds? And as you think of your businesses, what was your hope in attending today? And what's keeping you up late at night? So I had many responses, and I do want to let you know that, for the most part, people are sleeping, unless they had a customer issue, a new puppy in the house, or a brand new baby. So it is good that we're all getting some sleep. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a conference, and there was a pre-keynote speaker to the keynote speaker. And that keynote speaker ended up doing a lot of card tricks before the keynote. And then he ended up putting a 26-inch sword down his throat. Was anybody at that local conference? It was called Agents of Change, and it's for marketing people primarily, a couple weeks ago. It was a great conference, and I'm not going to put a 26-inch sword down my throat. So I know I hate to disappoint you, and guess what? I'm not going to ask any of you to put a 26-inch sword down your throats. Wendy, you're disappointed. Yeah. But the reality is today is that many of us feel like we have to have some new tricks, that we have to have some innovative approaches, that we have to do something different today because of all the uncertainties of businesses today. So as I was talking to many of you, what you were saying is that, you know, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the business world today or with my organization. I'm not sure, but I need more resources, I need more capacity, and I need to connect. And overall, what I heard as I wandered through is I need time to connect with others. Because the hope for today, and people were very optimistic, the hope for today was being able to spend time connecting with each other. And it didn't seem to matter as much in terms of how many people were walking through. It was you with your exhibits. You taking the time to value each other. For each of you to stay focused, as Jim Bouchard said. Think like the black belt, stay focused, stay disciplined, connect with each other. So as we look at this part of our summit today, I'm going to ask you to really think in terms of your businesses. And as I begin to ask some questions of the panelists, to really think, what does this mean in terms of my own business? I'm going to shift back here, and Mark promised not to trip me and have me fall backwards. Sort of. I recently listened to a talk, and if any of you have an opportunity to once a week listen to a TED Talk, it will open up possibilities in new ways of thinking. As I listened to a recent talk by Dr. Tony Wagner, author of The Global Achievement Gap, it was a reminder of what is needed today as the American economy continues to shift. Dr. Wagner commented that 72% of our American economy is based on consumer spending in which people go in debt. 72% of our American economy is based on consumer spending in which people go into debt. He raised the question of what will drive the economic engine in the future. And as Dr. Wagner's talk was focused on the global learning gap, he had interviewed senior executives and reviewed workforce readiness reports. He was assessing the skills that will be needed in a global economy. And as I listened to his talk, I found that the skills are not any different for students than they are for leaders in companies today. The profiles of companies that existed yesterday, in many cases, are not the companies of today. With new businesses or new approaches to businesses, new skills will be required. According to Dr. Wagner, students need the following skills: critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration and leading by influence, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship, effective oral and written communication, accessing and organizing information, and lastly, curiosity and imagination. In addition, in a study completed by the Wharton School involving more than 20,000 executives, 6 skills were identified. These skills, when mastered and used in concert, will allow leaders to think strategically and navigate the unknown. These are to anticipate, challenge, interpret, decide, align, and learn. This list is really not that different from the first list. If you combine some, we must, as leaders, be flexible and persistent in the face of change and setbacks that come our way. In the article, an example of this was Coors was late in anticipating the low-carb beer. Lego was slow in recognizing the digital world. And the latest, as we all have seen in the papers, is what has happened to BlackBerry phone, once seen as the forefront of digital phones. So we as leaders need to listen, listen, and listen. We need to listen to our customers, we need to listen to our employees, and we need to listen to our stakeholders. We need to be continuous learners. We're fortunate today to have with us 4 panelists. And I'm going to introduce each one of them, and then we're going to have an opportunity to ask them several questions so that we can look at their perspectives in terms of these skills that have been identified. The first individual that I'd like to introduce to you is Mark Willett. Mark is currently the Executive Director of Mobilize Maine, a statewide asset-based economic development initiative. Mr. Willett facilitates regional activities to create economic strategies and opportunities that move regions forward. Before taking his first position, he was the director of the Office of Business Development for the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And in another life, he was the chief of staff for former Congressman Tom Allen. He lives in Scarborough with his wife, Terry, and their 3 children, Colby, Jacob, and Sasha.
And 2 dogs.
And 2 dogs.
And a cat.
But no one keeping you up at night?
And they're all keeping me up.
They all are. Next, we have Wendell Case. Wendell graduated from Ithaca College in 1985 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Speech Communication and worked directly after college in corporate advertising in Boston. Her restaurant ownership career began in 1989 in the Berkshires. She and her husband, Alex, moved to Maine in 1998. The Cases bought Isabella's Cafe in Freeport in 2003 and focused heavily on developing their catering business. In 2005, they opened the original Buck's Naked Barbecue in a drafty garage in Freeport, serving slow-smoked barbecue and handcrafted funky dishes. Buck's relocated to a larger space in Freeport in 2008, and Wendell and Alex opened their second location in Windham in 2010 and their third in Portland in 2012. Wendell has served on 14 volunteer boards since 1999. She is the chairwoman of the Freeport Planning Board, serving since 2006, and the vice chairwoman of the Freeport Economic and Development Corporation Board, serving since 2007. She was previously a member of the Windham Economic Development Corp Board and is still active in comprehensive and strategic planning committees. Peter Anania. Peter is president of Anania and Associates, established in 1987, which manages several small businesses, including an investment fund, Anania and Associates Investment Company, with investments in the following main companies and 3 main business parks in Windham, Gorham, and Boothbay: Mega Industries of Gorham, M-Wave of Windham, Maine Cedar Log Homes in Windham, GrowTech of South Portland, Biovation of Boothbay, Lighthouse Imaging of Windham, TrackTech LLC of Windham, and the Science Source of Waldoboro. Peter is currently serving on the Windham Town Council, board of the Windham Economic Development Corp., Maine Heritage Policy Center, as a corporate for Bangor Savings Bank, is an emeritus board member of the Maine International Trade Center, participating in trade missions to Korea, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Argentina, Taiwan, Singapore, Germany, the Netherlands, and Mexico, and serves as a charter member of Maine's District Export Council, helping small businesses expand their export sales. And Richard Dyke was born in Wilton to parents who worked in a woolen mill and shoe shop. Dick attended Husson College and served in the Korean War in counterintelligence. He then worked for 4 years as an IRS agent before a 2-year stint at B&M Baked Beans in Portland. Dick then opened his own accounting firm, Dyke Associates. Over the years, Dick has owned more than 63 companies ranging from manufacturing, service, restaurants, hotels, automobile agencies. Most all were distressed companies that required capital and entrepreneurial expertise to get them on a new track to success. Dick owned Bushmaster Firearms for more than 35 years and grew it into the $85 million company before selling it to a New York investment firm in 2006. In 2011, he started Wyndham Weaponry, which now has about 95 employees, primarily in Wyndham, which is almost as large in sales as Bushmaster was when he sold it. Thank you all and welcome. As we begin to get started, I'm going to throw this first question out and would ask that each one of you answer this question. But what do you see as the biggest challenge organizations are facing today? Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. So the biggest thing I've seen in the businesses that I've worked with, and I've worked with businesses across the state, is really the idea of workforce and the idea of how do I attract a qualified workforce to my business. I think it's been it's pretty well documented that we have a workforce skills gap in Maine. I think that's pretty clear in a number of industries. I don't know, I'm interested to hear what the other panelists who are doing their work with these small businesses think about that, but I think for me, much more so over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I've heard that a lot more so than tax structure and other traditional issues that really face businesses. Not to say that those aren't important also, and they really are, but I think workforce is really coming to the forefront as people really struggle, especially when you look at the demographics of our state, which are aging very quickly.
Winta?
Great. I would say that the word challenge, I don't see challenge as actually meaning a problem. I would expect every single day in my businesses to have challenges. It's also kind of a litmus test for me to assess my staff and to know that they're able to fix a problem as it's presented to them. But in more of a holistic view, I'd say a challenge for me as an owner is to think too much about working in my business rather than on it. I think it's really important to develop a brand and understand what you stand for, both yourself, in your employees' eyes, and out in the public.
Peter?
Well, working mostly with smaller businesses, I think the biggest thing is really anticipation, forward thinking, planning, and really sticking to that on a regular basis. I think a lot of people will take time and plan and then not do it for 5 years. We try to have a regimen of a regular quarterly, let's take a look at where we are, where we've been, and what we're going to look like in 5 years. I mean, that's really the whole point.
Thank you. And Dick?
No comment.
Dick's never had a challenge.
I would say government involvement in business today is getting to be a real impediment to growth because you spend so much of your daily activity trying to figure out what government is going to do to you 2 years from now. And uncertainty in business and growth of business is critical to knowing what the game plan is going to be and what your responsibilities are going to be to your community and so forth. So I think that's a big challenge for any company. You know, I've spent all my life, as a lot of you know, just in buying sick companies. And the reason that I did it to begin with, because I didn't have any money, And so I had to use sweat equity and find some angels that did have money, that would have enough faith that I could turn a company around to get involved with them. Because I think in small business today, it's very, very important to do two things. Know what you know and know what you don't know. Because the more successful you become, the more people tell you, oh, you could get into anything and you'd be successful. Well, that's not true. That is just absolutely not true. So you really have to know what you don't know and stay away from that. And the other thing you have to do is, I think every year, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to sit down and you have to figure out, what the hell did I do this last year in the 2,400 hours, the 2,200 hours, or whatever number of hours you thought you put into your business? What produced the most for you and what produced the least? And that produced the least, you've got to be willing to shake it off if it's not going to get any better. That produced the most, you've got to try to put more emphasis onto that particular business. And thirdly, for most businesses in the state of Maine, other than if you're trying to service just the community that you live in, then you've got to look at exporting. And exporting is anything that goes beyond the New Hampshire border. That's an export. Because our population is shrinking, and the economic value of the population that we have to spending money is very regional in the state of Maine. And a great influx of people that look and are very wealthy don't spend a lot of money in the state of Maine. They come, they enjoy what we have to offer, but they don't spend a lot of money in the state of Maine. And the thing is always, the trick has always been, how do you get to be able to harness that group of people who can provide the resources for companies to grow? And I've said to government officials, now that I've got a whole bunch of them sitting here in the front row, that, and I've tried to say it at the state level, is that every community that's a fairly large community, and let's just take Wyndham, where we're here in Wyndham. It's the hub of a wheel, and a lot of communities feed into Wyndham. But if the state of Maine and banks and resources, I see some bankers here, because I talk wherever I can to bankers, that, you know, there's usually one or two companies in that community that really make the magic. And if they make the magic, then everybody else does well. The restaurants do well, the grocery stores do well, the pharmacists, the lawyers, and so forth. And if we could only focus the meager resources that we have here in Maine into those companies, if they've been alive for 5 years and if they've been profitable for the last 3 years, that's where we should put our resources and try to provide year-round jobs for people rather than just seasonal jobs where they have to go to the mountain, then they're on unemployment for 2 months, then they work in some summer job. They're not offered anything other than a salary because the little businesses can't afford to offer them. So the real trick here in Maine is, where are those hubs and who should we support with the resources that we have? And if we get lucky enough to do that, then our communities will grow and our children will have better educations, and our elderly and our less fortunate can be taken care of.
So as we look at this, you know, when I opened my comments and shared with you some of the things that organizations weren't ahead of, and oftentimes that's seen as, the term is used as disruptions and looking at innovation. BlackBerry was one of them. BlackBerry is saying, you know, what happened there? But as you look at your own organizations, or Mark, some of the organizations that you've helped lead and strategically, how have you seen or managed disruptions for businesses you've been involved with? Jump ball. Peter, want to take a stab at that?
Typically, it's the proverbial peeling back the onion to get to the core issue, I think. Where we have, for instance, we have a company that manufactures educational products up in Waldoboro, and they've been doing the same thing for 30 years, and this is the way it's always been done, and I've been challenging them, 5 years from now, teaching is not going to be done on the same platforms that they are now. It's going to be more electronic. There's going to be tablets. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. You need to be anticipating what those are. And so it's really getting down to the core issue of what it is they're selling and what it is they want to promote. And then focus on that.
Anybody else?
People, any company you have, it's the people that you attract to that company and your ability to motivate them. Almost every sick company I've ever bought, I haven't been able to keep any of the senior management because they're very stuck on the way they do it. And every time you try to bring about change, they say to you, well, that's not the way we did it. And you don't want to hurt their feelings by saying, I understand that, that's why I'm here, is because, you screwed it up and I'm trying to make something out of it. But so much of it is people. If you can attract good people and you can motivate them. We just made an investment in a company up in Conway, New Hampshire. And it's got 190 employees, so it's a fairly big company. And one of the problems that I'm just starting to deal with, and I've only got 15 days to do it because I go back to my winter home in Las Vegas, and I'm not giving that up for anything. But one of the things I found is that the management are good people. They make a hell of a good product, which is why I bought a half interest in the company. But they don't treat their people right. Nobody ever goes down on the production floor and says, now you did a good job, or thanks for cleaning up your area, or thanks for picking that up. They forget to do that. So the other day I said to them, well, I'm sorry I'm not going to be here for the Thanksgiving brunch. And they said, well, we don't do a brunch. I said, you don't even do a brunch? Do you give a turkey? Or do you give a gift card? Well, no, gee, we don't do that. I said, well, with my half of the company, I'm having a Thanksgiving and I'm having a Christmas. And if you want to come, you can come. And if you don't want to come, you don't have to come. But I've only owned the thing since July 1st. And of course, they love it when I fly in with my helicopter because that's a big deal for everybody up there. But I can already see the change in my management people. They're beginning to say, we've got to get down there, and we got to do the same thing that Dick does when he's up here. He comes in and motivates us. We got to go down on the floor and motivate our people. And interestingly enough, just in 3 months, we've seen our production pick up from 20,000 units a week to 24,000 units a week with the same amount of employees. So it's people, people, people.
Wendy, I want to ask a question of you. 2010, you opened your restaurant in Wyndham. And then 2012, you opened another restaurant. How have you led during this down economy, as some people consider it? And what do you find your employees need?
Well, I've sadly never experienced ownership in a good economy, so, I mean.
It's gonna come, right?
And nobody really needs to go out to eat. So, the onus is on us to provide something out there as intangible as that is beyond what's on the plate that people are seeking. And I think what has propelled us to keep growing meaning opening stores is to be strategic and to actually have goals in place. Because we have followed exactly the path that we projected. I didn't really expect to open the second store in Wyndham, but an opportunity presented itself, and that was on my radar. I thought long and hard about Portland, and 3 was the number for me. So I've always been a person that worked with a plan, and I think if you don't have a plan, you're doing your business a grave, grave disservice. Because you can always go back and edit it and rewrite it, but if you don't know where you want to go with your business, then all you're doing is you're working in a job. You're not working in a business, and there's a huge difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes, I work with individuals that have lost their position after 30, 35 years of working in a corporate environment, and they want to start a business. And they really look to me to say, am I the right fit? And they say, yep, I'm ready to jump off. So oftentimes when I'm working with them, they have a really hard time with coming up with all the elements in a plan. So how do you keep people, and how do you stay motivated to stay the course?
I'd say keep it simple, stupid. That's what I'd say. I mean, you know, in my industry anyway, we have a great operational team and a great management team. And I think one of the best things I've ever done is hired people that are so much better at these jobs than I am. I would be a disaster on the dining room floor. No one, my management team does not want me there at all. But you hire people that are phenomenal with people, that are truly gracious. And I look for quality in food and quality in service. Simple as that. Obviously, the place has to be clean. You have to have an inherent trust in my industry between the person that sits down, you know, and we're serving them, because that's an important piece now. You know, and I think in any industry, to be authentic now would be the silver bullet, because we're so used to seeing horrible service and people that are so apathetic and don't care at all. If you can deliver something genuine, then you win.
Mark, as you're working with organizations to put those strategies, how do you keep people motivated not to just put it on the shelf and say, that was nice for us to do, but how do you keep it alive?
I think the great secret, and I think Peter and Dick and Wendell have all alluded to it, is there are some businesses that a lot of people don't want to change. They do not want to change. It's extremely difficult for them to do it, and I always use my little phrase in Mobilize Maine, which is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you want different results, whether you're thinking about the Maine economy or whether you're thinking about your small business, you have to do things differently. Because if you look at the past history, and I think Dick really hit it on the head, a lot of businesses don't look back after their year and say, how did I do? What can I do different? What should I be focused on? Peter talked about a plan. Wendell talked about a plan. Most businesses don't have a plan. The state of Maine doesn't have a plan. I mean, you know, listen, let's just be clear. That's the truth. You know, that is absolutely the truth. And so it's really important when you're thinking about how to move things forward that you bring them right down to the ground level. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, you know, the way things get done, these three, they work hard. I mean, they work really hard. And not a lot of people really want to work that hard. I mean, you think about some of the great businesses in Maine, whether it's Chimbrow, that, you know, construction stinks, the economy's going, they grew. They're all over the East Coast, world renowned. Or you think about selling jam. Who's going to sell jam? Well, Stonewall Kitchen knew how to do that. They know how to sell jam. So you think about starting a restaurant and they all fail. And she's opened 3 in the worst recession in the last 40 years. So, you know, people who have that kind of motivation, people who think about how to make their business move forward can make it happen. I really believe it.
Thank you.
I've seen it.
What does it mean to think long-term today?
Well, to me, it's anticipation not only of what you are doing today, but also what your customer wants or is doing, and that now includes anybody in the world. About 60% of our products that we make are exported overseas, and you need to really anticipate where those customers are going, what it is they want, and be ahead of the game, if you will. And that's why discipline of planning, as we've talked about, and reviewing those plans on a regular basis really instills that in a management team to do that.
Dick, what does it mean when you think in terms of long-term?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm an accountant by education, so, you know, numbers are what drives me, and marketing skills is something you learn. You have to be a little bird, and you have to go from flower to a flower to a flower, and pick the brains of people who are a hell of a lot smarter than you are. And because anybody who thinks they're the smartest guy in the room is a damn fool, quite frankly. Even as big as this room is. But I think you have to make, some fundamental decisions on planning. I think the short-term planning, which is probably 2 years, and then there's some long-term goals. But first you have to define, if you're gonna grow, are you gonna grow vertically or horizontally? Now vertically, you're gonna keep adding, like this young lady, who keeps adding stores, and at some point, she will have a total group of stores, or she may see something where she branches out and goes to a different store. When I built Bushmaster, I mentioned that only as one of the 70 companies I've been involved with, but, because a lot of you know it, but, I made an early decision that I was gonna grow that company vertically. And so I was gonna keep adding and adding and adding, but it was all gonna be the same basic product line. And the diversification was gonna be that I would sell domestically, and then I would go overseas and so forth, to develop a product line. And now this time that I'm building Wind and Weaponry, I've made a conscious decision that we're going to do a horizontal integration. So we're gonna buy companies that are in the same general field, but in different product lines. And we're gonna use the Wind and Weaponry brand to carry those products out into the marketplace, so that there's safety in growing either way. But I think you have to make that decision early on. Even in a little small business, I think you have to decide, am I gonna carry more of the same products, or am I gonna diversify into other products? And am I gonna stay in one location, or have I gotta diversify into other locations? Am I gonna stay domestically in the United States, or am I gonna try to reach out into the world? So I think you have a short-term business plan that you pretty well solidify, then you have a kind of a long-term goal, so that you're kind of moving in that direction. But some things may trip you up in that 5-year plan. So, don't try to brand it in gold and think that I'm definitely gonna go from A to B to C to D. It, for some reason, doesn't seem to work that way, at least not in the businesses that I've been in, and I've been in about everything there is, from perfume to poker chips to, you name it, I've probably been there. Because I've always felt it was challenging just to see what you could do with a little sick business. On the other hand, you could put me in a room, give me a pad of paper and a pencil, and say, you can't come out of this room till you come up with a new idea. You would never see me again. I would still be in that room. And I'll be 80 in January, and I'd still be in that damn room. But I'm pretty good at taking somebody else's broken dream and figuring out what they did wrong about it, and turning it around and making it a successful business.
So each of you sit here as leaders here in Maine, with reaching far, and some of you focusing more local. Along the way, as a leader, what mistake, or just one mistake or mistakes, have you made, and what did you learn from it?
I can tell you a first restaurant mistake I made, and this is pretty easy to understand. This was in the 80s. All excited, my first new restaurant I owned, and I dedicated myself for 2 days sauteing seafood and buying natural sausage casing, stuffing the sausage and making a wasabi aioli sauce, and it was gorgeous. And we served it, and people just didn't get it, did not understand what it was on the plate. In this particular market, sausage to them meant sweet Italian sausage, and that with red sauce too, and shaped Parmesan cheese. So I squeezed out all the sausage stuffing and added cream, sold out in a day. So I did not know my audience. I did not know my market, and that was it was good to take me down a little bit, because you don't have to do things blown out. You just have to hit the market that you're shooting for.
Thank you, Wendy. Peter, mistake along the way, and as a leader, what did you learn?
I can't think of one at this point.
Thank you for being humble in that.
I mean, it's almost the same as what Wendy was just talking about. It's making emotional decisions versus finding out what your customers really want. Thinking you know what they want, what's best for them. Those have always been the worst decisions I've made.
Dick or Mark? Any that you want to
Well,
admit?
A big mistake that I've made in the past that I try not to make and I try to instill in my children is don't make any decision when you're angry. I think that there have been times in my business career or in my life when I've just made mistakes based on the wrong things. And taking the emotion out of things and looking at things clearly, I think it's been extremely important. And I can tell you that I tell my 7-year-old the same thing. There's you're never going to make a good decision if you're upset about something. So, anyway, that's about as good as I get.
Thank you, Mark. Dick, any mistakes along the way?
Don't go in business with an engineer. Very early in my career, I got involved in a little company down in South Berwick called Servatron, and they made the speaker system for drive-in banks whenever you drove in, and they sold the product to Lefebvre, and so I bought into the little company. I don't know, $50,000-$60,000, which was a lot of money back in those days, the engineer kept going down into the production floor and changing the damn model. And I kept saying to him, look, we got to make 5,000 of these the same, because if they don't work and we have to go out and fix them, we have to know which model the damn thing is. So I was constantly having that discussion with him. And then he went and had a heart attack on me. Now, how inconsiderate can you be? And he's in an oxygen tent in Sanford, Maine. And his wife calls me and says, John has got to talk to you. And I said, geez, I don't want to come up. I don't want to upset him. You know, I don't want him to die in front of me. So, but I do go up. He brings me down to the oxygen tent that he's in, and he says, our product obsoletes itself every 6 months. Oh. And I don't really even know what the hell our product is. So I jump in my car, and most of our sales were down on 128 in Boston. And I go from place to place, telling them, don't worry, he's going to get okay, he's going to get better, even though I really think he's going to die. And so we'll keep delivering the product to you, not knowing how the hell I was going to do it. And I got to National Semiconductor, who was one of our customers. And I got about halfway through my spiel, and the purchasing agent looked at me and he says, Dyke, you don't know crap about that business. He says, but we've been trying to get him to become part of our R&D department, but he's always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And he said, look, let me buy Servatron from you with the understanding that if he gets well, that you'll try to convince him to come to work for us. Well, the good story is he lived, I sold out, and he became the vice president for R&D for semiconductor. And lived to a good old age, and I had my bait back so I could go into another deal. Just as a side note to it, because she alluded to the fact that I grew up in Wilton, and my mom and dad worked in a shoe factory, and I used to push a lunch cart through the shoe factory, which gave me a chance to see my mom while she was working. But my first deal was a $200 deal. It was buying 4 cottage lots in Chesterville, Maine, on a pond called Snake Pond. These government people will appreciate this. And I had to borrow $100 from my dad, who didn't really want to loan it to me because he didn't think he'd ever see it back. And I had $100 of my own. And I bought 4 lots on a pond called Snake Pond. And then I went down to the legislature because it didn't have any money attached to the bill. I got it changed to Pleasant Pond. And then I advertised it in the Portland Press Herald, and a stockbroker who thought he had a farmer from Wilton, Maine, came up and I sold it for $500 a lot. So if you're ever in Chesterville, Maine, you want to be on a lovely lake, there's a little pond called Pleasant Pond, and there's no snakes left.
Great story. So this summit has been all about leveraging our strengths. And if you look at the list from Dr. Wagner, which I did send them in advance so they didn't have to memorize it, and the Wharton School for Research, what are 2 strengths you see in this Lakes Region community? What are the strengths of the businesses and organizations that are here?
I would say in the Wyndham Lakes region area, it's initiative and entrepreneurship. I think that there is a real fondness for the area and a real fondness for helping people in the area. So I think that the entrepreneurship and I guess the love of doing business is here and should be fostered. I think that's one of the things that is missing from Dr. Wagner is attitude. I mean, he doesn't talk about attitude, and I think attitude is important in any endeavor.
Thank you, Peter. Wendy?
I saw similarities between Wagner's collaboration and Wharton's Align. And I think for this region, because it isn't just one town, it's a region, it's going to be important to really work together as a greater community, because your collateral assets are regional. You know, your workforce is regional. Wyndham is the service center for 60-odd thousand people. The other towns have their own personalities and so forth, but I think it's probably a work in progress, and it's probably at the very beginning of it, or the cusp of it, if you will. But that's what I would suggest would be one of the biggest advantages in this area, is the ability to collaborate and work together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other strengths you see?
Well, I didn't like Dr. Wendell very much.
It was Wagner, but
I'm not
There you go.
only on television,
that's Wendell next door.
just on TV, folks, just on TV.
That's how much I paid attention to it.
That's how much he didn't
apologize.
like it. Did you like the Wharton research?
No, didn't like
just-
much of that either. The only reason I say that is it was all fine and good. I actually, it was very good. I didn't mean to say it that way, but I just think it's very difficult. I think one of the big problems we have is taking things that are abstract like that and making it practical for everyday lives and how we're gonna move something forward, whether you're in a business or in your region, how you're gonna do that. And I tend to get cranky with reports and with, you know, these big sort of policy thinking people. And I've read 1 million management books and done all the, you know, I think it's really, I mean, I think it's pretty I think you should poll the audience. What makes your region special? Because I think, and I think Wendell said it really right when she talked about authenticity being extremely important, especially in this economic environment. And, you know, I could tell you all day long what I think is important about your region and why I think you should focus on this or that, but none of that's going to resonate with you to get off your duff and to do something about it in this audience, unless it's something you believe in, and it's something you care about. And I think one of the big problems when you look at state government and you think about how, or federal government, is this top-down approach, how the feds and the state like to tell us all what we should be focused on. It never works. Not in Maine it doesn't anyway. We're too independent for that. So I think you really need to flip that around and really talk about what grassroots, what's special about you and your region, and how to really capitalize on that and how to leverage it. I got plenty more on that, but I'll just leave it at that for the moment and let Dick tell another great story.
Now that he got emotionally charged. Whoa.
Well, that's what you get when you're 80 years old. A lot of old stories. You know, I mean, I've been in Wyndham since about the early 70s. I remember Booty's Corner and dirt roads, and I bought 120 acres for $20,000 and thought I'd paid too much. But I've always had a fondness for the people. I think the communities that surround Wyndham and Wyndham, they're really pretty unique. I think they offer good educational opportunities to our young people in grade schools and high schools. I think that's very important because those are ultimately the people that are going to approach us in business and want to come with us. I think there's been a camaraderie at the local level in town governments to try to work cooperatively and not try to up each other and to duplicate services and things of that nature. But I really place it on people. I'm very up with these young people here in this area. I go around and talk to anybody that'll listen to me, and I just find it, and I find it true in Maine. I was just up to Hudson giving a lecture, and 3 weeks ago I was down at Harvard and gave a case study, and it was to people working on their masters at Harvard, and when you graduate from Hudson College, you don't have much going for you at Harvard because they don't even know where the hell it is. But when I mentioned that I did go to Wharton and get my master's, then they kind of upgraded me to a different level. And then when I said I got my doctorate from the University of Maine, I went back downhill again. But I just find that Maine people, if you give them a break, if you tell them you appreciate them, and you try to do something not only in the work environment, but in the social environment. I think that's very important. And I think that brings them together. I think they work well together if you can bring that camaraderie to your workforce. I think you have to make it fun. I think you have to change things every now and then just to make it interesting for your employees. And if you can involve your employees outside of the company in worthwhile events, like Oktoberfest that we've just finished. Our people got very involved in that. And we're involved with the backpack program. We have a payroll deduction for $3.85 for kids in the Wyndham system and the Raymond system. And we feed 130 kids every Friday. We make sure they go home with some food. Now, sure, that makes you feel good. But the most important thing is my employees feel good, that we do a payroll deduction of $3.85, which feeds a child every weekend. Now, that's a pretty remarkable thing to be able to do. And there's so much hurt going on out there right now that anything that you can do that involves your employees to make them feel that they're doing something outside of the business to be creative and to be productive, then I think you've got a winning combination.
Thank you. Peter, we do know how Mark felt about the different skills that were required, but what do you see as the strengths of this region in terms of how they can leverage those strengths? You said initiative and entrepreneur, so how do we leverage that?
Well, I think speaking more about Wyndham, and because it is a center and so forth, I think we need to upgrade the infrastructure in town here. I think we need to, look at underground utilities. We need to look at streetscapes. We need to look at those things that will attract good, well-paying jobs in the area. And what the town can really do is to focus on those particular areas.
I have a couple more questions for you, but right now I'd like to turn it over to you to ask them questions that you might have. And we have a couple people that are going to help us with mics. This is
Please
your
be
awkward.
nice. Please be nice.
Questions for these leaders?
Please introduce yourself and let them know what town.
Do I have to?
My name is Sumner Field. I'm the town manager in New Gloucester. The panel, I think, in general terms, has spoken about a number of factors that are important in their business. The people, a plan, hiring good people, people who are knowledgeable, and Mark, I don't know what you said, but overall, to me, that sounds like leadership. Can you speak to what it takes to be a leader and the leadership qualities that an entrepreneur or a business owner needs to be productive with our region?
Who wants to take that one? I don't know anything. So the question is really, what does it take to be a leader?
If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to get up every morning, and you've got to look in the mirror, and you've got to be satisfied with what you see. Because the day is either going to be the greatest day in the world, and if it is, you'll be on this mountain someplace, and if it all goes to crap, which it will, then you're going to be down lower than a mouse. But you can't show that to your employees because you're their leader. And so you've got to look in that mirror, and then you've got to spend the rest of the day motivating everybody who works for you. And if you show weakness, or you show that you're not certain as to where you're headed, all you're going to do is you're going to create doubt in their mind, and they can't function that way. So even if you're having a very shitty day, you've got to be sure that you don't show that to your employees. You've got to get them through that day, and you've got to get through that day yourself. Now, it isn't for everybody. Everybody should not be an entrepreneur. And I say this to young people wherever I talk. If you don't feel extremely confident about yourself, then you better go to work for somebody else. And you'll do a great job, and you'll probably become the vice president of a company that has all sorts of manuals, and you can look in a manual, and it'll tell you everything you need to do. That's not what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur needs to be moving in different directions every single day, because that's what being a small business guy or lady is all about. And so if you can't get up in the morning, look in the mirror, feel pretty good about yourself, then you better go get a job. And we have applications at the office every day.
Someone else, what does it take to be a leader?
Well, I'll echo what Dick says, stability and not panicking when things come up, thinking things through, as Mark said, not making a decision when you're emotional. But I'll go back to the vision thing, which is basically having a vision, helping the company or the team come up with their vision, and then revisiting that on a regular basis. And then you have to have belief. You have to have belief that you can make that happen. You have to have belief that your people can make that happen, and you have to believe in your people. So I think that is, one of the things everybody says to me, how can you do this? How can you, there's so much risk. I just believe in the people that we hired, so.
Wendy, Mark, speaking to what it takes to be a leader?
Yeah, I think there's so many different things that you have to do. You have to be a little bit psychotic, basically, because, you have to know your numbers. You have to know your break-even numbers. You have to know where you're profitable. You have to know your seasonality. You have to understand cash flow, especially in Maine, because there is a really tough period, at least in my industry, from New Year's Day to whenever the mud season goes away. And it changes, too. And by cash flow, too, you have to be a leader and steer your ship so that your staff's confident in you. And when you have a snowstorm, in February on a Saturday that delivers 27% of your weekly sales, you're going to be able to stay open for the next few weeks going after that. You know, I also think you have to motivate your people. You know, you have to lead people, and you have to manage problems and expect problems. But it's not the end of the world. And that's the thing is, the buck kind of stops at you, and if you can't run away and hide from any challenge, you've got to just kind of stare it down and say, well, I really messed up, or, well, the federal government's really giving me a run for my money today. I've got to figure this out. But it's up to us so that everyone else can feel confident, and that delivers a good product to the customer.
And Mark, would you like to speak to what it takes?
I'll just say that I think leaders are special people. I think they are different, and I think you kind of know one when you see one, and you understand that you're willing. I've worked for strong leaders, and I've been a leader in some of the organizations that I work for, and, you know, confidence and vision and managing chaos and all of those things matter. But it sort of just takes a special personality, and not everybody's really cut out for it. Dick said. I just don't think, you know, so I think that folks who do that, who are there and do that kind of work are interested, you know, that doesn't make them any more special than anybody else. That's what they're built to do. Nothing wrong with that, and other people are built to do other things, and it's one of my great, I think, management lessons in my life has been, let's have everybody work to their strengths. This idea we're gonna teach you to have you work on your weaknesses and all of that, forget that. Let's all get the most out of everybody, and, you know, I know what my strengths are, and I certainly know what my weaknesses are. God help us. I've got plenty of them, oh my gosh. So, you know, I know that, and that's why I put people around me who can complement those things that I don't do very well, and we move forward.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Don Willard, town of Raymond. I've been a lifelong municipal official, so I really have never created anything or done anything of any great note. But we do try to be helpful, supportive, to encourage business. And so along the line of, you know, keeping it simple, stupid, which is what I understand, what is it that we can do? If there was one single thing that we could do as a local government, because we are limited, of course, in our abilities to help you, but we want to help you. We encourage that in our staff. We get a lot of positive feedback about that, but everywhere we go, we hear, or I hear, you know, it's government. Government's in the way. Government's stopping, you know, prosperity and success, and we don't want that, contrary to popular belief. We really want to help you. So what's the one simple thing that a local government could do to help business grow, develop, and locate in Raymond?
I think town process, you know, streamlining your town process for people entering into or potential new business people is a huge advantage. The permitting stage and so forth, I would highly support any municipality to consider having in-office approvals for smaller projects. And I mean, you have the planning board, and then sometimes you have the project review board and so forth, but it takes so much money to have a project stalled by 6 months because the town council only meets twice a month, and their agenda is full with other items. You know, if you really want to have business in your community, I would make it my job, if I was there, to be as accessible as possible to let the flow of business run through your systems as easily as possible.
Others want to respond?
I would say two things, and one is what Wendell was saying, is that become that business's partner. I mean, you want to make that happen as much as they do. That, you know, become the partner. How are we going to get this done? How, instead of no, 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 which is the easy answer, how to get to a yes? Let's make it happen. And I think the other thing is consistency in terms of ordinances and rules and regulations. If they change every year or every other year, that's just going to scare people away.
Right.
Yeah, one word, certainty. Certainty is just so important to businesses. You know it, I mean, you've obviously been in the game long enough to know that people that volunteer for boards, whatever board it might be in a community, most of them have an agenda. Most of them have an agenda. And it's up to the town manager to try to manipulate that agenda look at them all laughing down there. You know, I wish I had a picture so I could show all of you. You know, they're sitting there guilty as hell. So, you know, to the extent that you're the town manager, and to the extent that you can influence it, you know, try to keep people off those boards that really have a one agenda purpose of being on that board, because they'll be destructive. They're usually destructive to the process. It's not easy to do as a town manager, but to the extent that you can work in those areas, I think that's most helpful. Because when the process gets bogged down with, we don't want to tell the guy we really don't want his business in our town, but we can't tell him that because he'd probably sue us or some damn thing. But it's certainty. Business people just like certainty. If they know what the rules are, I think most business people try to play by those rules. But if the rules keep moving, if the goalpost keeps moving by the community, and they keep postponing the hearing, or they ask for more information and more information, that's just detrimental. If you don't want him or her, just tell us, we'll go someplace else.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Billy Burke, and I'm from Naples, Maine. I'm a business owner and a parent. And with the economy the way it is, I'm a parent with 3 children, and not one child resides in the state of Maine. With industry, lack thereof, and we can say the government sometimes stands in the way, what are we going to do to keep our youths who are and can be entrepreneurs, but they take their skills, their dreams, and their visions out of state, if not out of the country? What are we doing in this area that we can entice and keep our children here, or we're going to take our businesses and leave, because it is about family. It's not just about business. You treat your family as business, and you treat your business as a family. But when it gets separated and you don't have the means to sustain life here in Maine, it's all moving out. What recommendations do you have to keep that in Maine?
So how do we keep the youth here?
Well, this is a lifelong problem, of course. I'll just say that I went off, I left Maine, went to school, and I came back, and I think I'm a better person for it. I'm glad I left. I'm glad I lived someplace else. It gave me a different perspective, and I happen to come back, and some people don't, and that's okay. That's just my perspective. I think that if we kept every young person in the state of Maine here over the next 20 years, it would still not fulfill the workforce needs that we're going to have over the next 20 years. So let's just also keep that in perspective, that there were only so many young people to keep here. And we can, and with the flow of the way things work and the way people go to college or do other things, it's just, I kind of go back to where Peter has been around entrepreneurship and innovation. I think when you create that emphasis, you start to capture the imagination of young people to do something here. And you give them those examples, and you put those pieces in place, whether it's angel financing, Dick talked a little bit about that, or a whole bunch of technical assistance to try to help young people, entrepreneurs, fulfill their dreams and do what they want to do. I think that's the next step for the state of Maine, personally. You can see it happening in the service centers in Portland and in Bangor, Lewiston, Auburn, and it needs to spread. And, when you talk about having panels like this, and you've got Dick up here and Wendell, I mean, it's pretty, I'm pretty excited, to be sitting up here with them and hearing what their stories have been, what they've done with their business. That good word needs to be out there. I don't think it's out there enough, frankly. We don't tell the good stories enough. There are really good companies in all of your communities and where you live, doing great things and working hard and hiring employees, and we need to do more of that.
Peter?
I don't have a problem with people leaving and coming back. I think it's going to be a couple generations before we have enough of a business infrastructure for kids to stay here, number one. And going out and experiencing life outside the state of Maine, I think is great. And wanting to come back, which they usually do, is great too, because it brings back to us talents that we might not have had. So we hire quite a few engineers from around the country and move them here to Maine. In fact, we've hired 4 or 5 right here at Lighthouse Imaging in Wyndham to do some medical optical devices that we manufacture. So I think that's a good thing. I will say, however, that we need to, I think, have a different attitude in the educational process where manufacturing is not a bad word. Manufacturing is really computer programming today. It's computer operating. It is not a bad word. And I think, I see Steve McFarland here. Steve has some programs that they're trying to get kids out to see the local businesses, see what they do, and maybe that will spark what they, keeping them here in the state.
Other questions? Okay. Take one last question, and then I will give each of you one last question to respond, and we'll
Thanks.
wrap up.
Hi, Derek Goodine, Town of Naples. I've spent countless hours talking to Mr. Dyke, mostly listening to him, and that's a good thing because I've learned a lot from him. Talking to Mark at our Mobilized Maine meetings, I think he knows that I'm not afraid to throw something out there that is necessarily off the cuff, controversial, on the edge. And one of the things I mentioned was the fact that we had a lot of summer camps. And Dick touched on, there's a lot of people around here with a lot of money that we're not reaching, that may be able to create those jobs that we want. They love this area enough to send their kids here. How do we get them to actually build a stake here and actually help grow our economy by creating jobs, I guess is my question. And also educating our kids for those jobs is one of the keys.
Anybody want to take it?
That's a tough question. I mean, a lot of it has to do with infrastructure, too. It depends on the type of industry that the person is involved in. We've got to really get a handle on transportation and not just, north, south. It's got to go to these service hubs, too, not back roads behind a school bus, 3 times a day, because that's difficult. It really is. But I'd say that, if someone has a vested interest in Maine and for a residential purpose, they've already understood the quality of life. And so that would be the draw, and that will be the draw for, I have a 23-year-old, and she has no interest in actually moving out of my house, basically, but.
The opposite problem.
She's happy. She's really happy. No, she doesn't live with me right now, but, but, the kids, and I know I have a lot of friends that have young kids, 20-year-olds. We employ a lot of those kids. They've got great ideas. And there's a lot of niche industries that are very innovative. There's surfboard companies. There's a whole food industry that's really bubbling up out of the organic movement in Maine, and we're one of the bigger players in the country. And it's about branding. Quality of life, safe food, local food. I'm not sure if you're specifically talking about manufacturing, but that's a huge, huge possibility for Maine too. The problem is where are you going to put those companies? I would go back to the drawing board in some of the municipalities and say, are we set up, ordinance-wise, zoning-wise, to accommodate growth if it comes our way? Because if you really look at some of the ordinances, we are in no way, shape, or form prepared for growth.
Yeah, that's fair.
I want to thank you for your questions. And one quick one. Go ahead.
Very quick point to that. You know what I found, and I've put educators and businesses in the same room quite a bit over the last couple of years, and what I find is the language is not the same. And educators say they want to listen to businesses, and businesses really do want to talk to educators, but they're not on the same page. And so a lot of times what you get in a meeting like that is you get an educator, a business saying, you know, what I really need, I use this example all the time, so forgive me for all the people who are bored of hearing this example for me talking, but, you know, what I really need is to be able, I just need a guy or a gal who can convert a decimal to a fraction and be able to, multiply, and the educator's sitting there, diligently writing down, oh, so you need an acuplacer, 8th grade, blah, 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 and the business is going, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just need somebody to be able to convert a decimal to a fraction, this is not complicated for me. So what I think, what we've been able to do is break down those barriers over time by putting them in the same room. And it's tough, but I think it's really worked out, and we've done a lot of good work around that. And if we continue to do that, because I do think the businesses need to drive the education system a little bit. Not all the way, but part of the way there. You'll hear what they need when you get them in the room.
Dick?
I'd just like to go back to kind of your question. When I became chairman of the board up at Husson, I wanted to understand whether the curriculum was meeting the needs of the students. And I thought one of the things that would be very helpful is to reach out to the parents and say, look, why did you send your child to Husson College or St. Joseph's or wherever? Why did you send them there? What are your aspirations? And I was shocked at the answer because, now this is 25 years ago, but it hasn't changed a hell of a lot here in Maine. Most of them said, well, I want my son or daughter to come back to Madawaska and instead of working in the factory, I want them to be able to have a job in the office. Now, that's a pretty low threshold for you wanting good things to happen for your child. So I think all of us, we always have to test ourselves. Are we being selfish about what we want? Or are we really saying to our child, there's a big, wonderful world out there. Go out and capture it and bring it all back to Maine. That would be my word to you.
So as we begin to wrap up, and we will be able to continue this conversation in the after-hours gathering that Amy will let us know where and confirm with us, I want to ask very quickly and briefly for each of you to respond to this. We have had our first business summit today. We've had a full day. We've been listening and connecting with each other. What do you want to challenge us with as we leave here today? Hearing from each one of you, what can you throw out as a challenge?
That wasn't in my list of questions that you gave me.
But I knew you could come up with that, Mark.
Yes, absolutely. I think that I believe that economic development is, every one of you has a stake in economic development. I think this idea that you're not part of the economy or you can't do anything about it is not true. And I think that each one of you really, I hope you'll leave here today inspired, thinking about how you can help the region grow, how you can help make it a better place than it already is. It's a beautiful place, and you can do more. You can do more. And I hope you'll consider doing that, whether it's with Mobilize Maine and the efforts that we're working on, or whether it's with one of the other panelists and doing whatever things they're up to. I think there's a great opportunity for you to be involved and to do more. And that's the only way the economy is going to happen in the region, is if you do something about it.
Thank you. Wendell, your challenge to us.
Well, I guess my challenge would go out to the folks in the audience that own a business, and I guess I've seen more businesses struggle because of this reason than most others. Is I'd challenge you to look at, well, imagine you're putting on, maybe guys don't do this, but if you're a female, you'd put on an outfit and you'd go in one of those dressing rooms where you see all sides of yourself. It's never good for a business. But imagine that, I'd like to see a harmonious view of how you see your business, how your staff sees your business, how your customers see your business, and maybe your competitors see your business. Because if you asked each one of those subsets what they think of what you're doing, if they're not aligning, then you're not going to be able to move forward, because perception and delivery is really, really important.
Don't have a vision and say, oh, we'll never be able to do that, and just shelve it. I mean, think big and figure out how to do it. Go for it.
Thank you, Peter. And Dick, what do you want to challenge us with as we leave here today?
Don't get discouraged. You know, most people that come to these kinds of seminars, if you're really totally honest with yourself, you're discouraged. There's something in your life that you're discouraged with. People in the front row here that try to do the best they can with the community that they've chosen to work for, with a whole multiple of personalities to have to deal with, and a lot of you, I'm sure, is the same thing. So, if there's anything that I hope we've imparted to you today, is that we're optimistic. Every day is an optimistic day. And so if you had a discouraging day, then just blow it off and know that tomorrow is going to be a better day than yesterday. I think the other thing is that it's part of the responsibility of people who've been lucky enough to be successful in business to help those that haven't. And so, call upon all of us to be of some help to you if we can be of some help to you. Don't be a pain in the butt. But, if a quick call to any one of us sitting on this roster, I'm sure that we would try to get back to you and try to work you through maybe a question that you have or something that you can do. And so don't get discouraged. Tomorrow's going to be a better day than today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I'm going to turn it back to Amy.
Well, I want to thank all of the panelists. This was a great discussion today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. In closure, I just want to let everybody know that immediately